All right, thank you. Yeah, so I guess Lane reached out to me after we did the initial 5 episode series, and he was like, "Well, you taught everybody about Azure, but I don't think everybody still knows what you guys do." And I said, "Oh yeah, you know what? I forgot about that because I was so focused on really going over the basics of Azure. I forgot to really highlight why somebody would use Nerdio, right? So that's really what I'm going to start with today. So as an MSP, right, there's really typically 4 challenges that MSPs have when going to Azure or when thinking about going to Azure. And those are the 4 areas that we've made heavy investments in our product for, right? So we have, sorry, I have a new baby. So we made heavy investments in the area of quoting. All right, so in Azure, things are variable cost, things are pay as you go, and that's different than on-premise because an on-prem environment, you can go to tech data, build out, whatever you want to build, mark it up by 30%, go and sell it, and that's the end of the transaction. But when things are a consumption based, it becomes very scary in a way when if a customer asks for, I want 2 quotes or one hardware and one for cloud. How do you kind of effectively do the cloud quote in a way where you got to make sure you're not losing money, you're not underquoting or overquoting it, or and if somebody asks you a question, what something cost, some of the answers that you don't want to give is, I don't know, or it depends, or it's somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a month. Those answers don't exude confidence and don't tell your customer, that you know exactly what something is going to cost, right? So those are areas that MSPs have had sort of issues navigating. And we solve that by giving you our award-winning calculator, which goes through a series of questions that you guys can answer. That's going to give you and spit out a cost per user per month and show you exactly what this is going to cost. And then area 2 is around the deployment, right? So to be able to deploy anything in Azure, you kind of have to know the ins and outs of Azure, how things work, VNet, storage accounts, resource groups. But a lot of MSPs are just getting started in Azure and don't have the skill set to do that yet. So Nerdio, all you have to do is go to your distributor, or you go to SureWeb, get your CSP subscription, tell us what it is, and Nerdio will basically deploy everything you need for your desktop environment and for your IaaS environment into that subscription, so you don't have to go and fiddle around and create things manually. So Nerdio automatically deploys a virtual desktop environment in about 4 hours without any engineering involvement. So that's number 2. And number 3 is the management interface, right? So I think some of you guys have seen this, maybe most of you haven't, but the management interface is what makes Nerdio valuable, right? So even after the initial deployment where you didn't need an engineer, you can get your level 1 help desk with minimum training to be able to manage virtual desktops in a way that, without PowerShell and without, learning the ins and outs of Azure, and being able to do 98% of your normal MSP day-to-day tasks in this one interface. And then lastly, we help you optimize the environment to help you bring the cost down by scaling machines in and out, by helping you with reserved instances and a concept called Azure Hybrid Benefits, which we talked about in the first couple of episodes of the series. So hopefully by that now you should know what those things are. If you need a little reminder, Azure Hybrid Benefits is basically you purchasing a CSP subscription license in order to take advantage of the discounts it gives when you apply that license to a VM. And then a reserved instance is basically when you make a commitment, either 1 year or 3 year commitment to Microsoft in order to get a substantial discount on each virtual machine. So those are the cost saving levers that Nerdio talks about all the time. So what you're looking at on my screen now is our cost estimator. So we have 2 different ways to kind of estimate costs, right? You can either go infrastructure as a service. So you have a customer that doesn't require virtual desktops, just need VMs in the cloud. You can pretty much add the VM individually here and be able to come out with the cost. I'm not going to really spend time on this one because there was one episode in the series where I spent an hour just on the calculator. So you can rewatch that if you want. But the point here is you fill out this form, pick the VM sizes you need, press OK, and it'll spit out a cost per user per month for a customer with, let's say, 50 users running these VM workloads in Azure. It's going to cost you about $31 per user per month, which includes the cost of Azure, M365, and Nerdio cost, all in this one price. So what I want to spend a lot of time today is on just on the management aspect of Nerdio, right? So after you've come up with the quote, you go mark it up, let's say 80%, you go sell it, and the customer says okay. Then you go to Nerdio and you say, all right, let me go and get a subscription from Pax8 or from SureWeb or wherever, buy a subscription, make sure there's a Microsoft 365 business license available, and you go and click on add Nerdio for Azure account, and you tell Nerdio that you want to build a Windows virtual desktop account, hit next, and then go ahead and click connect and log into your CSP subscription. Right, this is how you let Nerdio know that you're allowing Nerdio to manage that subscription for you, right, and to be able to install things inside your customer subscription. So simply log in, and it's going to pull down your available subscriptions and be able to proceed forward. So this is the part where you wait 4 hours, and when it's done, you get a account here, right? So an account is basically an account that you've used Nerdio to spin up any type of resource in. So if I have an account called Goodheart Inc., and I'm going to show you how to manage this customer as like a level 1 help desk agent, or maybe perhaps the project manager, right? So if I click login, you'll see a interface that it's got a summary of the environment, right? So I could see, where this account is, what domain it has, what region it's deployed in, how many users it has, some shortcuts to kind of add users or add groups, or, edit servers if you want. You can see how many people are logging into this environment. You can see time of day people are logging in, and a list of activity of, the last person who did, anything in Azure, right? So everything that anybody does in your organization in Nerdio will get logged and logs forever. So if I click on users, this is basically an insight into my Active Directory environment. I have a domain controller that's running in Azure as a VM, and that domain controller is synced via AD sync to Azure AD. So basically, you see an object in here. It exists both on the domain controller and in Azure AD, and you can manage those settings all from here, right? You can see, this guy Abe, his email address is this, his username is this. Obviously, this is a demo, so we have a fake domain name here, but it'll be your full email address of your end user customer. You can see what desktops they're assigned, what size the desktops are, what regions the desktops are deployed in, what the last time he logged in, right? You can unlock the user if he gets locked out or because he tried to log in too many times incorrectly. I could disable somebody really easily if somebody's maybe suspicious, and I get a call on my help desk that I get an indication that this person might be let go, and they request to kind of disable the user. You can disable them. You could see what Active Directory groups they're a part of, right? So at a quick glance, you can see Abe is part of marketing group, finance group, accounting group, sales group, pretty much all the groups. And based on the groups that he has access to, Nerdio makes sure that map drive folder that he has access to, he also has rights to from a security group perspective. So not only are you looking at what groups he's a part of, but you also have a good indicator of what folders he has access to in the map drive schema. So if I hit the drop down next to each one of these users, you'll see some help desk automation tools that we've built in to help automate some common tasks that help you save a lot of time. So if somebody calls in and says, hey, I forgot my password, you can click on reset password, type in the password here, and then we'll reset it across multiple, the Azure AD account as well as the domain controller account via AD sync. If you want to disconnect somebody from a session, you don't have to go into the session host itself and do it. You can just click on disconnect session. Nerdio will send out that PowerShell command to disconnect that session, whichever session that user is on. You can log somebody off the session, right? So maybe you want to log somebody off. You can log somebody off. This is still Windows, right? So once in a while, you still, somebody will log in and they might get that you logged into a temporary profile. And then, once you see that, your engineer should know that, hey, there's something corrupt with the profile and have to kind of blow it out and maybe, create a new one, right? Which takes a lot of time because somebody calls in at 11 p.m. and they report a corrupt profile. It'll probably take you about 30 minutes to figure out the corrupt profile, go and delete the profile, have it rebuilt, open up Outlook to wait for all the emails to cache back, open up all their QuickBooks to make sure all their folder paths are pointed to the right place. It could be 3 hours before you hand that desktop back to the customer, and guess what? They're out to lunch, right? Now you can't get them, and then now the ticket remains open for the next day. So you don't want to do that. All you have to do is click on Revert Profile. Nerdio captures VSS snapshots throughout the day, and you can just pick a previous point in time and revert the profile back to a prior time. It takes about 15 minutes to restore. and that customer is back in business. You can edit a user if you want. If I click on edit user, you can change anything about the user from a AD perspective. You can change their AD roles and add them to user groups, and you can change the AD attributes, do all those things, right? You can assign them a desktop, you can turn on an MFA, you can assign them a new 365 license, you can switch them over from one pool to another pool or give the person a dedicated desktop. Anything you change in here, you press confirm or save, Nerdio is going to go through and look at all the changes and then apply just those changes to that user. So it sure beats kind of going to Office 365, doing something there, and then going to the domain controller and editing something here. You just do everything in one place, and Nerdio does it across the board. Replace user I like to talk about a lot because it's one of those features that save a lot of time. So let's just say this guy Andy, he's leaving the company, and his last day is Friday, and of course, the customer calls your help desk at 4:59 p.m. and says, this guy's leaving. I hired a new guy named John. He's starting on Monday, and I want to make sure John has access to all of Andy's old emails and files so he can continue doing his work. Well, that's a big task, right? And then, of course, on top of that, he asks, well, can you also buy John a new computer and have it set up ready at 8 a.m., right? So, the guy's going to say, well, can I buy from Staples? And you'll be like, no. So all you have to do is click on replace user and type in, John's first name, last name, email address, press OK, and we're going to go and create a new virtual desktop for John based off your golden image. So all the applications are already pre-installed. We're going to create a new Azure AD object, create a new domain controller account for them, sync them together. We're going to take Andy's old Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, strip it from Andy, assign it to John. We're going to take Andy's old mailbox, turn that mailbox into a shared mailbox to free up that license. And also to give him full rights to the mailbox so you can see all his old emails, we're also going to take Andy's desktop, documents, OneDrive, and SharePoint and redirect that to Andy's or John's desktop as a little shortcut. So that happens in a matter of 5–10 minutes, and you saved yourself probably an hour's worth of time from just exporting PST files and setting up permissions and then having to buy a new computer, imaging it, going on site, spending an entire day migrating his applications over. Like that just saved a lot of time for you guys. So that's the whole idea of managing users. You can manage your groups, which is AD groups. You see that Nerdio automatically sets up these file shares to these specific groups out of the box. So if you assign these people to the groups, they'll automatically get that map drive access for those department folders. So you can add your own groups or edit these groups. Same with distribution lists. You can manage your entire environment's Azure servers without needing to know Azure, right? So in the top section, you have all your running VMs that are running in Azure. You're just able to pick them up and be able to see them. You can click on edit to kind of change the size of VMs if you want, right? You can pick from a different series of VMs. And one of the other episodes I went through, we talked about when to use each series and when to choose and how do you know where to pick or which ones to pick. I believe that one was session number 3. You can go back and look at that as well. And Lane has the recordings for that. Same for disk storage. You can go up in size or change disk types, right? We have some pre-built options in here for very common sort of server administrative tasks. You can restart a computer or restart a server, stop a server, add a new data drive, change the IP address of a server, maybe throw it into the DMZ, make it publicly accessible. You can set up auto scaling. You could, generate an RDP file, for the first time if you want to log in and start installing your RMM agents in there, you could do that. If you click on add server, you can very easily add a new server. So let's say I call the server an app server, and this is a 2019 server. Pick the disk type, pick the VM size. I can even enable other regions. So let's say you have a client that's in multiple parts of the United States and you feel better maybe having a server closer to their office instead of, where your headquarters are at. You can kind of drop a VM in any region if you want. Nerdio automatically sets up that domain, sets up that VM for you and joins it to the domain and then gives you RDP access to that environment. I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions. Feel free to just unmute your mic and just yell them out. Come on, guys. I know somebody has questions. No? All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the WVD section. So this is where you manage your Windows virtual desktops, right? So and I think in episode 2 of our series, we talked about why WVD was so important to Microsoft and why it's important to MSPs in general. And again, the recap of that is really anytime you have a server with a database running in it, you know, and you think you can have a PC on premise over a VPN access that database, many times the application database is not a flat file based data system, and it won't work well over a VPN. And prime example is QuickBooks. You can't run QuickBooks in a file server running in Azure and have the QuickBooks client running on a PC on premise and expect a decently sized QuickBooks file to read and write fast like you would expect it on a LAN. You can't do that, right? So the best thing to do would be to put a virtual desktop right next to the server. That way you can talk at, you know, gigabit LAN speeds, and all it's doing is drawing the pixels back to your customer's computer screen. So that's one sort of use case. And the other use case, especially in the pandemic now, nobody wants to work in an office anymore. So what do you do with that equipment, right? Maybe it's coming of age and it's good to retire them. Well, why not just put everything in the cloud? And that's the whole goal of what a lot of people have been doing in the last couple of months with Nerdio, is spinning up full virtual desktop environments, including their servers, up in Azure, and having that be the main headquarter location of where everybody connects into. So in virtual desktop world, which is episode 2 of our series, we talk about pools and how these pools work, right? So I'll show you again how these pools work. So a pool is just basically a name for a collection of Windows Virtual Desktop Session hosts. If that's confusing, I guess think about Windows Virtual Desktop Session host, nothing more than a terminal server, except it's running Windows 10, right? So in a pool, I'll just go to pool B, for example. If I click on manage, well, before I go into pool B, you can see some information about the pools, right? What the pool name is, how many users are assigned to this pool, where this pool is located, right? So in all 4 of my samples here is located in the North Central region, which is up in Chicago. Each pool has a session host template of, you know, let's say, for example, in pool B, I'm spinning up 8 core 32 gig of RAM machines that are Windows 10 multi-session machines running many people in it, right? So I have 88 people assigned to a pool with the 8 core 32 gig of RAM machine. Obviously, one machine of that size won't do it for them, right? You need multiple machines. And you can set up auto scaling, right? So auto scaling says at the minimum, I want 1 machine turned on. The maximum in this example, I have 2. Only scale out if the CPU usage exceeds 65% or more for 15 minutes. And then at the end of the night, maybe only after 6 p.m. when you know people are logging off, automatically scale back in order to help save money by removing the servers if the CPU usage is 40% across all the session hosts and for over 15 minutes and only after 6 p.m. So obviously these variables you can change by going to managing your auto scaling settings. You can go and change, you know, how many machines I want at the minimum, how many machines I want at the maximum on my auto scaling in and out settings. If I want to pre-stage machines to have, you know, all 3 or 4 of them on Monday through Friday by, you know, 7 a.m. because, you know, that's when people start working. I can pre-stage these machines to be online, so you don't have to wait for the CPU in order to scale out. So it's going to help you kind of start your base and avoid like a boot storm. Right, the whole point of auto scaling in Nerdio is to help save money in Azure. Right, things that you're not using at night, you can delete and it'll get recreated the next morning. And then here's some quick stats on the health of the pool and what's going on in the pool. So right now in this pool, I have 1 session host, 0 on standby. There's 1 user logged into it, which probably be me, and the average CPU session on that pool. If I click on manage host, you can look at the session host that's active right now, which is in green. It's on. When somebody logs into pool B, they're actually logging into this session host, this IP address. You can even see who's logged in. If I click on users, it'll probably just be me. And I can, from here, you know, log somebody off or disconnect them if I wanted to. I hit back. I go back into my pool. You can see down here in the middle, this is your template, right? So this is how you install new applications. All you have to do is power on this template, RDP into this IP address, you know, install your Windows updates, install your new version of QuickBooks. When you're done, click power off and modify, which is a button this will change into when it's on. And then when it's done, you click on update host and it'll push that update and the date timestamp of that image and replace this one that's running right now. So you can pretty much, that's how you update software without affecting somebody in production. It's you can do it after hours, or you can even add a new host to the pool and go to the old host, click on deactivate, which tells the Windows Virtual Desktop broker not to let anybody new into the system. And you can even send a message out and say, hey guys, we just updated the new version of QuickBooks. Do me a favor and log off and log back in. They'll all get that message pop up on their Windows 10 machines. And if they choose to follow your orders, they'll log off, log back in, and the WVD broker, because the initial server was now put on deactivated mode, they'll be forced to log into the new machine with the new software, right? So you'll wait till everybody does it, and when you're done, you just simply delete the old server, and now you've essentially in place migrated somebody over in a live production environment and switched images. So that's the power of Nerdio. You can manage a lot of this virtual desktop stuff without knowing any PowerShell or doing this stuff by hand. And then we look at the networking section, right? So we have the Azure Firewall, Azure VPN, additional on-ramp regions. I'm actually working with WatchGuard under the instructions of Lane to help create a WatchGuard guide. We're actually in the middle of it right now. We're testing it right now, where you can deploy a WatchGuard in front of Azure if that's what you choose to do so, and just follow a guide that'll bring you all the way through. So that'll be coming out probably, I want to say, another couple of weeks at this point. But if you don't want to use WatchGuard, Microsoft has the native network security group firewall, where you can kind of manage your stateful firewall, allow, deny, CIDR ports, all that for your DMZ LAN, and also your your DMZ and your LAN as well. Unlike a local ISP where you can buy either one IP address or a pack of 5 or a pack of 13, IP addresses can be purchased individually, one by one, and Azure will give you one IP address for about $4 each, and you can assign that and add it to any, point it to any specific server you want if you want to publicly expose that VM. So as your firewall rules, you go to your VPN section, which is down here. I've already opened that up. The VPN connection allows you to set up to 10 site-to-site VPN tunnels from Azure to your customers' various sites, right? You could do more than 10, but you would have to upgrade your VPN SKU to the next version up. Most customers are okay with 10. There was maybe a few that maybe needed more than 10, which we can do for you. But all you have to do is add VPN tunnel, give it a name of the tunnel, IP address of the firewall, right? So if you be the IP address of your WatchGuard, the local IP address of your internal network, and the subnet mask, and press save, and Nerdio will build that tunnel for you and give you all the VPN settings. If I click on view settings, to set up your settings in your WatchGuard to be able to establish that tunnel. All right, so this supports IPv2, pre-shared keys, your Azure network, here's your VPN gateway in Azure, here's your local stuff that you've supplied, here's your phase 1, phase 2 settings. All you have to plug them in. Sometimes you have to kind of ping across the firewall to kind of enable that tunnel. But that's how easy it is to kind of set up a VPN tunnel to Azure. There are some appliances that we know don't work with VPNs in Azure, and that's really not because of Azure, but because the firewall appliance itself hasn't updated to the latest versions of the latest standards. So the latest standard is IPv2 for IPsec VPN, and Meraki's still have not adapted to the latest standards, nor Sophos SG firewalls and a bunch of AdTran. So if you don't have any of those 3 firewalls, you should be okay setting up a VPN to Azure. And of course, SonicWall, WatchGuard, Fortinet, all the common ones have no problem doing so. Down here, we have the ability to add additional on-ramp regions, right? So if I click on Add Region, and let's say you have a customer that has another office in, I don't know, Korea, rare, but maybe you do. You click on, add that region, press confirm, and Nerdio will go and add that region and make it usable in a drop-down, so you can select that region when you go and create new virtual desktops or create new servers, and possibly want to put it in that region. And then we move on to backups. So we have the ability to use Azure backups to back up your data. So anything in Azure, it's ideal to kind of use Azure backup to back everything up. It's got the same feature set as the most common backup vendor in the MSP space. If you think of a Datto, I would say the only thing it doesn't have compared to a Datto is just that screenshot verification. But anything else that a Datto does, this can do easily in terms of file level restore, entire VM level restore, mounting a restore point to an existing VM as a new volume snapshot. All those things can be, you can use Nerdio to turn it on to backup. Nerdio will immediately install Azure Backup Agents in every single one of these VMs that you already have. Right here, I've disabled these backups on purpose because I don't want to waste money in my demo, but my important things are being backed up. I could restore from it, pick a previous restore time. I could restore the entire VM, or like I said, restore a specific snapshot point and then just drag the file back out. You can back up using LRS backup. So in Azure Backup, there's kind of two tiers, right? Two main tiers. There's LRS backup, which is local redundancy, which is basically using the same Azure region as where you deployed your environment. It's going to back up your environment 3 times in the same region, or 3 different locations in the same region. And Microsoft's going to put them in opposite sides of each other. So let's say you're in the East Coast here, and a big truck rolls down I-95, crashes through a wall, and hits a data center where your VM happens to be, and that's the Azure data center. Your data is not lost. Your data is in 2 other locations in the same region, opposite sides of each other, right? So if you think about what a region is, it's not just a single data center. It's multiple data centers stacked on top of each other. And so your data is resilient to 99.119 of SLA is what they claim for LRS backup. But if you have a compliance need to do outer region backup, let's say you need HIPAA compliance or other type of compliance where you need just another region, you can enable GRS backup, which stands for Global Redundant Backup. And Microsoft will pick 2 other regions in the same, in the Americas and put your data there as well. And each one of those other regions also has 3 copies of your data. So now you've increased your SLA from 99.119 of uptime availability to 99.169. So, 11 to 16 maybe isn't so much, but if you think about how much more redundant that is, it's quite a lot. So that's your backups. We have the onboarding section, which will help you sort of import users. We can help you migrate data from your on-prem or another cloud into Azure. So if you click on Add Source, you could just type in the IP address of your, let's say, on-prem firewall or firewall that's, or maybe a on-prem file server, and maybe you have a file server somewhere else. You can just type the IP address, give it a domain username and password, and Nerdio will see it and be able to use that as a job source to help you pull data from this source, this drive, this folder, all the way to a server running in Azure for you. So it's going to do a robocopy, an incremental backup. So it's going to do an initial snapshot first, pull all your data across, and then every single night at 12 a.m. or whatever time you pick, it's going to go and take the deltas. So when you go and cut over on a Sunday, you don't have to do another big batch of a file copy. It's already been doing it throughout the week for you. So that's one of the big features in this section here. It's the ability to copy data from any existing source over a VPN tunnel. Security, we have this concept, this play on security score. We've kind of taken what Microsoft has done with security score based on Office 365, and we've applied that same sort of look, to the servers and desktops, right? So basically, Nerdio, when we deploy this stuff, we can see what GPO policies that are set up in the domain controller that you haven't enabled that has to deal with security. So if you enable them, we can give you little points based on the fact that you've enabled them. So it's a good way to kind of look at your security posture over time to see, what things are turned on and turned off from a security perspective, not only from Office 365, but on a desktop level, on the storage level, on the on the server level and networking level, the whole thing. We have some reporting. So, we can report on, and, who's using the environment. You can run reports on a monthly basis. You could send out these reports to your end user customers on a monthly basis. When I used to work at an MSP, I used to have people contacting me 3 months after the fact that they let somebody go. They never called their help desk to disable their account. So they go, well, why are you still billing me for my Office 365 license? That customer, that user left, no longer works for us as of 3 months ago. And we go, well, did you tell us? And he's like, no, well, I can't give you a discount or a refund because you never told us, right? So we used to get that a lot, and it would just drive us crazy. And I'm sure you guys witness the same stuff. But what we can do here is schedule these reports to be sent out to the end user customer. It'll drop it in their email, and that way at least you can say, well, we've been sending you reports. Well, you didn't report it to us, so we can't give you a refund, right? So put the onus on them. Down in settings, we have some security settings. You can enable Nerdio to be accessed from a certain IP address if you want. MFA it. You can turn on two-factor across the board for every single user. We have a built-in safe DNS, which is a DNS filtering tool, just like Cisco Umbrella, but Nerdio's got an enterprise license for it, so we built that in. So every single Nerdio deployment comes with DNS filtering that you can manage using this different interface. I'm not sure what's going on here. But if I go to provisioning tasks, and expand provisioning task, it'll basically give you a view into what Nerdio has done from the start of the initial account deployment all the way to the end of it, right? So you start by creating your private network. So these are all the things that saves you a lot of time that you don't have to go and manually fiddle with, right? So in that 4-hour time span, we'll go through from step 1 to 10 and get you an environment that's ready to start migrating into and start installing applications into. So, if you think about it, 80% of your sort of migration is done off the bat, and then you spend the next, however many weeks or days, sort of installing new applications, testing it, prepping for go live, and then going live. And I would say, one of the biggest things people forget to do, right, when you quote out anything in Azure, we quote out using the reserve instance and Azure hybrid benefit concept. But I can't tell you how many MSPs forget to commit to those things after they go live, and then they call me back a month later and say, "Hey, your quote is incorrect, or it's not accurate, or how come my bill is so high?" Right? And every time I walk through the quote with them, the first things I ask is, did you commit to your reserve instances by calling your distributor and telling them you want to commit, or did you purchase the reserve instances or Azure hybrid benefits and apply them? Right? The answer is always no, or I don't know what that is, or anything like that. So just don't forget to do those things. So that's where people get caught all the time. If we're quoting it out based on that number, you ought to do that commitment in order to get that number, right? So not sure how much time we have, but that's basically, I've kind of gone through all of the Nerdio admin portal for us. Are there any questions?
Not going to get any questions.
No.
Tony, one thing we're seeing is with new members starting up and kind of getting in trouble before they even get rolling. What is your recommendation for, you got a net new partner. A lot of our members have signed up, for your portal, but it takes them a couple months before they actually close that first deal. So, once they close that first deal, what should they be doing?
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, we obviously, we're showing you this now. It's going to take you to kind of plant the seed, and then maybe a need will come up before the client said, "Hey, remember the time you told me about Azure? Let's get that quote going," right? So when you're quoting it out, you can come to me and we'll sit down and we'll architect the whole thing and say, all right, what do you have? What does the customer have? What are their apps? What do they use? We'll go through all that to help you quote it accurately, and then you go and sell it. But when the customer comes back and says, all right, I approve this, how do we get started? Most MSPs, so the proper way to do it is we have a team called Go Live Engineering Team at Nerdio. The purpose of that team is to connect with your engineers to help you go through the entire process of setting this up from scratch, assuming you've never done this before, right? Assuming that you're new to Nerdio, you're new to Azure. We're here to kind of handhold your way throughout the whole entire process. But what a lot of MSPs do is they forget that there's a process involved, and they go, I needed this done yesterday. Can you help me right now, right? And the answer a lot of times is no, because obviously we need to collect information about your environment, make sure you've done the quote correctly, and then we'll put you on a schedule where at least the next day is when the earliest time we can schedule a call up with one of our engineers to kind of go through this. So we've seen that a lot as sort of poor planning or not planning at all. So the gist here is if you know something's going to land, let me know about a week in advance. I can make sure I can have a Go Live engineer ready and dedicated to helping you. Otherwise, I mean, we'll do our best to kind of pull you through it given the situation or the timing. But that's ideal is if you can give us about a week's heads up so we can get that process in order. That's a great question, Lane. Why don't you ask questions based on what partners have asked you over time? Maybe that maybe spend some time doing that.
Oh, geez. Well, let me take a look. I got a list.
But that's a good question. That's, and actually that happened the other day. So.
Hey Tony, I actually have one. Does auto scaling actually save you more than putting the pools on reserved instances?
So it depends, right? So when you put a pool in a reserve instance, you're gonna spend more money, but you have a consistent workload where VMs aren't being spun up and spun down all the time. So the answer is no. When you reserve something, it's not going to save you as much money as scaling up and down. But you're always reserving at least one machine, right? So if you think about a pool, if one machine's always on, that machine is always going to be in a reserve, and the rest of the machines are probably going to be on pay-as-you-go, but using Nerdio auto-scaling to scale up and down. That compared to reserving all 5 machines, the auto-scaling is going to save you more money. But what we've seen based on practice is a lot of MSPs, you know, haven't really dealt with the auto-scaling before and can't manage an environment in terms from an RMM perspective on how to scale the things up and down, and whether or not I install my agents on them or my antivirus still goes on them. Like questions like that get unanswered. And for those, you know, MSPs that are worried about those things, I would say it's better to spend a little bit more money, you know, reserve all machines that you want to be on and just leave it at that and not mess with auto-scaling. I would say you're not really going to get any real advantages from auto-scaling unless you have about 50 users and above anyway. But Nerdio, you know, we have another product that we've launched a couple months ago that deals with like larger customers, and those customers, if you apply auto-scaling, they're able to save like 70% on their Azure bill. But in the SMB, you know, MSP world, we're not seeing workloads like that. So I would only recommend auto-scaling really 50 users and above. Anything lower than that, I would just reserve all, you know, all the machines. Hopefully that answers your question. So there's pros and cons of doing it. The pros is obviously saving money, but the cons is if you haven't figured out a way to kind of install and uninstall your RMM tools, then don't mess with auto-scaling. And we can help you guys determine that and help you with that on a case-by-case basis.
Well, you mentioned the RMM tools. What are you seeing across the board? Are most of your customers putting third-party RMM tools on? Are they leveraging Microsoft monitoring, or what are folks seeing out there?
Yeah, so if you think about like the end user computing space of the larger enterprise customers, they don't use RMM tools, right? They solely rely on images, and because these machines get destroyed every night and recreated, they don't really care about whether or not that thing is protected, because the machine itself, Windows 10 comes with Windows 10 Defender, right? And Windows 10 Defender ADP is about to go GA very soon. So most people would say, all right, I'm not going to actually install my own RMM and rely on, you know, Windows 10 ADP, which is actually really good, right? And then the people who use RMM, you have to think about when a machine scales out, how do you automate the installation of that RMM agent, right? And then when the machine scales back in or deletes itself, how do you automate the uninstallation of that RMM agent, right? So people who are using ConnectWise and Kaseya, there's very easy scripts to do so. I think Continuum is a little bit different. I know there's 2 different pricing models as well. One where, you know, you pay them a little bit extra for an agent, and somebody in Continuum manages and patches your VMs for you. Some people have the less cost model where you're kind of managing that yourselves. So it really depends. But you know, RMM tools work. They just, you know, if you're not prepared to learn how they work in an auto-scale fashion, you may be better off just having the machines on all the time and not worry about auto-scaling.
Now, what about on the server side, though? Like with your domain controllers and everything?
Oh, yeah, the servers, you absolutely still install RMM, right? Because
Okay.
those RMMs is patching the systems for you. So remember, Nerdio is not we're nothing but a management tool for Azure, right? We don't really patch your systems. We don't patch your systems for you. Not really, but we don't patch the systems for you. We don't, you know, we don't do your updates. We don't, you know, anything like that. That's all using the tools you guys currently have today.
Okay. Well, if we're not getting any other questions, let's call it a.
Well, maybe some opinion, all right? So basically, you guys have seen this. Maybe you've seen it before. Maybe seeing it for the first time. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, not because I work here, but it sure beats doing things manually for sure. I don't think anybody would argue that. But what do you think in terms of you know, Azure? Does it simplify Azure for you guys from maybe a quoting or even management, day-to-day management perspective? It should. No, nobody wants to volunteer. Okay.
Nope.
All right, but those are the guys. If you guys are waiting for WatchGuard, we're coming out with a official guide from WatchGuard that walks you through installing a WatchGuard firewall appliance with Nerdio. So that's coming out in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, if you have any questions, reach out to me. My email is tcai@getnerdio.com. You guys already know that. And I'll help you out. You know, I'll help you quote it. I'll help you, you know, architect it, deploy it. You know, if you have anything else, let me know.
All right, thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
I did record this, so I'll send out